It's
Yeah.
recording.
Okay, we're recording. We're in good shape here. Okay, so a review of jump rings. All right, so last week I showed this chain bracelet that I made, double links. This is exactly an ounce of sterling silver. And I believe it's 14 gauge wire.
Is that a jump bracelet?
Yes.
Okay.
And typically, the length you want to make for a bracelet is 7 inches, which includes the clasp. Of course, there are variables to that. Depends on the size of the wrist. All right, so I have some annealed wire. You must have annealed wire. This looks like 14 gauge. Oh, it's a little long to make a coil. I don't need this much length for a coil, that's too long. Should I have some thinner? No. All right, I showed you 2 different ways of wrapping coils last week. Here's a piece of
What
thinner
is a
wire.
good length? 14 and over? 14 and higher?
For the gauge,
Yeah.
14 is a nice gauge. 16 is okay, 18 is a little thin.
What if you want it to be thin?
You could go with 18. Some of the chain books will tell you to use 20 gauge wire, which is really thin. So I would stay away from that.
Does this make your work harder or?
Yes, it does. The size of the jump rings also will make your work harder, more difficult. Really small jump rings are difficult. All right, so we have these guys. This is what I was using in the demo last week. These transfer punches, which are really for woodworking, but they work well for us when we want to form something round. We also have a set of really large ones down there, which I'm not taking out because they weigh a ton. Now, if you're using thin wire, you can easily wrap this around a mandrel with your hands. So I just take the end, bend it around the mandrel, and wrap. And make sure you pull it taut and make a nice tight coil with no space or gap in it. So, nice tight coil. Now the other method I use for, I forgot that bench place, for thicker wire, a little harder to wrap by hand. So what I can do with this portable bench vise is to put the end of the wire in the vise, close it real tight, and then I can take a mandrel and roll that around the end, and then roll this, and I'm pulling on it so it's tight as I'm rolling. And this is an easy way to make your coils. So I would say the length of the wire for a coil is about 1 foot. If you make them too long, they tend to flex when you're trying to saw your jump rings apart.
And then if you want smaller hoops, you can use the thinner ones like this one.
Yeah, this would be so difficult. I wouldn't use that one. But do keep in mind that the outside, this will be the inside diameter of your jump ring. So they're going to look larger when you roll the coil. Now the other method I have, but I don't know if I have another piece of wire. Do I? Another piece of thick wire. You can use a wooden dowel, which can make sawing the jump rings apart a little easier. What's this? Looks to be about if I drill a hole in the top of the wooden dowel, I can put the wire through there. This doesn't feel like it's annealed. And I can wrap the coil. This is hard. It's not. It is not annealed. Let me get this out of here. There's no way that's gonna wrap neatly. All right, so let's try a piece that I know is annealed.
You're not free.
Oops. Thank you. Okay. Wrap this up, and then I can cut the jump rings apart right on the dowel. Whereas if I use those other mandrels, I have to cut the jump rings apart on the saw blade. I put the coil right on the saw blade. All right, to take a saw frame out, here it is. I think that's better. Okay. So I'm done with this. Let me get this out of the way. What I can do with the dowel, this already has a slice in it, is I can support it in the V on my bench pin, and then I can run my saw blade. If I didn't already have a slit, I would make one. You can put a piece of masking tape on the back of the coil so that your jump rings won't drop. They'll all stay stuck to the masking tape. I have to cut through that first piece. Snagged. And did we break the blade? Yep. I knew to take out extra blades. It's a strange looking blade. I have to get through that top piece before I can get to the rest of the coil. Come through. Okay. Now I just have to watch I don't slice my thumb. Now you can try this. You'll have to go out and find your own dowels. I don't have wooden dowels in the studio that you can use. I think the coil wouldn't move as much if I had taped it to smoothing while I'm sawing. You can also move the coil up the dowel as I'm sawing. Okay, get the idea? These should be coming off. Come on. There we go. All right, so there's a couple done on the dowel. And stuck on the blade. All right, that's that's fine, I can take them off this way. If I'm gonna do the coil, let me do the thinner wire. I can put the coil right on the blade, support the blade, the frame, your saw frame in the V on your bench pin. Just back in. Coil on the blade, and then hold the coil at an angle, so you're only sawing through one jump ring at a time. And then you're gonna slide the coil back and forth on the blade. This is where I find that lubricant to be very helpful. It's all the way in the back, but you might want to try it when you're sawing jump rings apart. You can see how the coil kind of snags on the,
Isn't that thing on the?
yeah, it's the blue stuff. But you want to make sure you hold the coil at an angle so that you're only going through one at a time. You can't lay the coil flat on the blade and try to saw through the whole coil at once. That won't work. Believe me. Now, does anybody remember why we have to saw these apart and not use a wire cutter?
Evidently, I don't know what the word, I know what you mean.
The wire cutter will crimp the ends.
Okay.
This is like the worst saw blade in the world. The wire cutters will crimp the ends, and you'll never get them flush to solder them closed. These are not my usual saw blades. Now, the trick is going to be for me to find that groove where I already started sawing. And that blade moved. I've got this first jump ring has like 2 grooves in it from sawing, so that jump ring will not be usable. Some of this on. Get back in there. I usually have this much trouble sewing jump rings. There they are. All right, the next step is to see what these ends look like. I think they're okay. The next step is either to assemble all of the jump rings for my chain, or I can assemble half of them. Actually, I'm not going to say assemble half of them. I can solder half of them closed individually. That one's not good. And then I can assemble them with the unsoldered links. And then I only have half the soldering to do when I go back to finish, if that makes any sense. The chain, the silver chain that I showed you, that's how I did that. I soldered half the jump rings closed individually. So I laid them out like so on my soldering pad, soldered them closed, brought them back to my bench, and then assembled them with the unsoldered rings. It was easier because those rings are so close together that it made soldering a lot easier.
So you did every other one?
Yes, I did every other one soldered closed before I assembled them. All right, let me see if I have enough rings here to actually solder. Some of these did not come out good. Okay, I'm gonna break the video here.